in September. I was invited to Government House in Sydney. It's a great honour.
And you got a little tie there.
I'm very proud to be able to invite my family to such an auspicious occasion.
Well, you're a good boy, aren't you? You're a good helper, you are.
One of the things I heard a lot when I was growing up is, you know, people don't change, leopards don't change their spots, tigers don't change their stripes. If a person thinks that way, they won't change.
Okay, swirl.
You have to want to change to change.
Gregory's story is unique. Though many people experience childhood trauma and, drug addiction, alcoholism, homelessness, not a lot of people turn their lives around to such a level. So when he speaks, people do listen.
I didn't realise how much of a big deal it was until we got to the castle that day. And there's all these really fancy dressed people. And now it's kind of like, oh, this is why Mum got me to wear a suit.
It was amazing to think, like, he lived in a forest and now he's, like, getting one of the highest awards you can get. Like, that's a pretty big transformation.
Today, for service to the community through social welfare organisations, Dr. Gregory Smith.
I received the Medal of the Order of Australia.
To be recognised this way, it was quite a significant moment. It wasn't lost on any of us.
I just feel very honoured and privileged. When I lived so close to death for so long, I certainly don't want to be someone that says, that's it, I'm done. I'll walk out here today and I'll look for another adventure. It's just, life is an adventure.
I'm still grappling with the immensity of that honour and what it actually means. It adds a lot of value to your opinion. It adds value to your voice.
Okay. There's different ways of rough sleeping. There's different ways of being transient.
Not everybody that sleeps on the streets wants somewhere to live.
Well, here we are in Woolloomooloo, Sydney, and I quite literally slept next to that pillar. I was the type of person that was unapproachable. I was genuinely too dangerous. What I needed was to be left alone, and revel in my own agony. I spent most of my adult life homeless, and I've managed to be able to get back up on my feet. Sometimes that's not easy. Sometimes you just find that one person that's willing to give you that opportunity, just to give you a chance. Changing who you are is a great adventure. To go on that adventure, you need to take stock of what you're going to take with you. That's what happened to me, was, I made that decision. No matter what happens, I don't want to be this person anymore. I grew up in Tamworth with my 5 sisters. My father was the most dangerous thing in my life. I didn't like him. He was a horrible human being. He always smelt. And I didn't realise it at the time, but today it was alcohol.
Family life, it was extremely frightening. It was extremely violent. Dad was often really angry and he had been beating Mum up. And then he'd turned on us, and Gregory was trying to protect us. We didn't have a chance to run and hide. I remember my father just beating him to a pulp. There was blood everywhere.
As a child, I was always waiting for the next beating. I was always waiting to be abused. One day, I got home from school and my mother just said, tomorrow we're going to go and see Auntie Muriel. next day came and we're all packed into the car and we're off to Armidale. I remember thinking, wow, that's a big house Auntie Muriel lives in. It definitely wasn't Auntie Muriel's house. Where we ended up was St Patrick's Orphanage. I was 10. It hadn't occurred to me until a couple of days later that my mother had gave me away. My mother gave me away. I was sexually abused in that orphanage, and some of those perpetrators were young women, 15, 16-year-old women. And it was their responsibility to bath the younger boys. So, I mean, there's, you know, it's very, to me, it's still very confusing.
The punishments were really severe, brutal. You know, putting kids in isolation, depriving them of things.
Underneath the staircase, there was a closet. And I could be locked in there 4, 6, 8 hours a day without food, without nothing. I developed this technique whereby I would retreat into my inner mind, and in there I built this little, beautiful little forested area that had a force field, and in there I could be happy and I could be okay. From the age of 14, I spent around about 4.5 years in juvenile detention in the punitive system. I did some very silly things. I stole, and I mean, my respect for society was so low.
I remember being a teenager and him coming back into my life. By that point in time, he was really angry. And you couldn't talk to him. He was so angry.
I was given a battery of tests. I was of very low intelligence. I think my IQ was measured at 81, and psychologists, psychiatrists diagnosed me as a sociopath. And I'd ask different people around, you know, what's a sociopath? Somebody that has contempt for society, creates a lot of violence in society. Yeah, I'm good at that. I can do all those things. When I left the institutions, I was so angry that a person would only need to look at me sideways and I would shoulder charge them. I would headbutt them in the face. I was merciless. I was doing my apprenticeship with alcohol. Rum meant fight. Rum meant pain.
Every time he came into my house, whatever it was he wanted vanished with him. He'd stay for a night or two, and then when you'd get up and he'd be gone with all your things.
I managed to get a couple of jobs in Tamworth, met my future wife. That relationship centred around alcohol, and I would get angry and abuse her, and that turned into a pattern over time until she decided one day that she was in a dangerous relationship. She just started to see me for who I really was. I was 25 years old when I realised I was an alcoholic. I'd become my father. In the early days of my addiction, it was just about alcohol. But during my exploits, I was introduced to cocaine, amphetamines, and heroin. I was also addicted to prescription drugs as well. I had a couple of little jobs here and there, but mostly I was pretty much transient. I was hitchhiking up and down the East Coast, just trying to find a meal.
We were driving on the M1 past Dreamworld, and I looked out the window and I saw him hitchhiking. And I turned to my husband and I just said to him, keep driving. Because he's like, but that's your brother. And I'm going, yes, I know. Keep driving. Don't stop. We don't want him in our life. I just couldn't do any more trouble at that point.
If you don't want people to find you, you have to go where people won't go. I'd exhausted all my options, and I was walking along these roads just southwest of Mullumbimby, and this dirt road seemed like a good idea at the time. And at the end of the dirt road, there was a forest. That's my bedroom window. This is my campsite, quite literally.
The forest for him became his haven, his sense of peace. Probably not his preferred way of being, but the safest bet at that point in his life.
The forest took me back to when I was in that cupboard under the stairs in the orphanage, and I'd formed that place in my mind, of no humans, just a nice soft place. I was never going to glean enough produce from the forest to satisfy my addictions, so I established a nice little area north of my camp whereby I could grow some marijuana plants. Some of that horticultural product I traded for cash, and I was able to buy homebrew kits. It was quite a lethal brew that brought me to my knees. I don't have a lot of clarity around those years in the forest because it was mixed in with psychosis. I'm off having conversations with some aliens or gremlins or my ancestors. And they're saying that they're concerned about me and that my health is deteriorating.
He had some simple choices to make. One choice was to go down the road of alcoholism, drug addiction, living out in the forest. That was a road to oblivion. Or take the very brave, necessary step for the alternative life, of which he had no idea what that might look like.
I have no recollection of months after I exited the forest. The very next consciousness that I have was actually sitting on a park bench at the back of the Tweed Heads Hospital. I was still very sick. I still had psychosis. There was still a lot of confusion in my mind.
He was at death's door. He was a guy who had a whole range of problems that alcoholics experience, all the neurological problems. He used to walk with a stick. He could barely walk.
And all of a sudden it struck me. I had created all this damage. I had caused all this mess. I thought I was fighting other people. I was fighting myself. My whole life I'd been fighting myself. And I remember dropping to my knees and I'm thinking, I don't want to fight anymore. So I made a decision there on that park bench that I would do whatever it took not to be the person that I was there that day.
Well, he stopped drinking, and that made a huge difference because it took one big factor in violence away. And then his memory started getting better as well. He was able to function, to actually learn.
I never thought I was dumb. Everybody told me I was, but I didn't think I was. So I decided I wanted to go and learn.
Good to see you.
See you.
Gregory came to TAFE in 2003 and I was one of his teachers. You want to go and see your classroom?
Let's do it.
Okay.
That sounds good to me.
He came in and he was dressed unusually, so you could tell he'd had some life experiences. I was teaching adult tertiary preparation, which is a course designed for people who want a second chance at education. I remember you sitting about here, so it was a desk to the side.
I did. And the reason I sat down there was because I couldn't see anybody else.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. He sat and he cried one day, and they were sort of tears of frustration, but then they were tears of, can I really do this? And then he got on with the job.
And I remember you ringing me.
And so he would write draft after draft of an essay until he got it right.
This is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he was like a sponge. He just absorbed everything you taught him and more. He learnt.
Towards the end of my TAFE experience, this word sociology kept jumping out at me. And when I looked up the definition of sociology, it was about, the study of human society. And I thought, yeah, I want to know about human society. I want to understand why I hate society so much. And I went to Southern Cross University. I was doing some research for an assignment there, and in my search results, this Forgotten Australians kept coming up. Upwards of 500,000 kids, non-Indigenous, experienced some form of institutional care as children. I thought, that's me. And it talks about the abuse that was systemic in Australian childcare for so long. And it talked about not being believed. To discover that there's a whole lot of people out there that have experienced the same thing. Just knowing that they existed was cathartic in itself.
Hello, Gregory. How nice to see you.
I became aware that there was free psychological counselling available for Forgotten Australians.
How you been?
He came to see me because he'd had a history of trauma and he hadn't had any counselling for it. I was totally blown away by incredible resilience and the fact that you never gave up.
I still believed I was a sociopath.
That was another label that actually made him feel inadequate. I mean, he may have done some terrible things, but he doesn't meet the criteria. He has a conscience. His morals are intact. It's been a struggle for you.
Yeah, it had me moments.
One day, he said, "Do you think I'm a sociopath?" And there was a silence, and I turned to Gregory and I said, "Mate, that was a label that was slapped on you. If you're a sociopath, we're all sociopaths."
Richard Hill, to his credit, kept telling me that I wasn't a sociopath, but I still had these reservations. I'm a scientist at heart. I need proof. When I was invited to do my honours, and I'm in discussion with Richard Hill about, well, what is an honours? I have no idea. I didn't even know what honours were. And he explained that to me. And then, well, what am I going to do honours on? And he turned around with this wry smile and he just looked at me. He said, well, why don't you do it on what you know best? What's that? You.
Hiya. I became his supervisor. He wrote all his substantive chapters in about 6 months and he got first class honours and he got an APA scholarship. He did really well.
I didn't always have the language to tell my story. And it's through education that I was able to find that language.
He does stand head and shoulders above the rest. He's done a PhD. That's not an easy task.
Chancellor, I present to you Gregory Peel Smith, who has been admitted by you to the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
They can go down underneath that and they never have to touch the top of your land.
He's now a lecturer. He doesn't big note himself. He just goes about things quietly.
The thing to remember is essays are people too. I respect the idea of being a sociopath started to dissolve a little bit towards the end of my PhD. Let's not call it a cover sheet because it gets my heart going. They told me I was stupid. If I can do a PhD, maybe I'm not so stupid. Maybe they've made some mistakes on some of these other diagnoses. You may also be looking at the tax department. Today, I don't think I'm a sociopath. Yeah, I'm just another human being. Do the best I can, like most human beings. By 2019, early in 2019, I'd pretty much achieved a lot of the things that I'd set out to achieve. But in terms of companionship, relationships, I'd parked those ideas. And then one day I just received a phone call from
the editor of a magazine asking me to do an interview.
I was writing occasional articles for Regional Lifestyle magazine, and I was asked to write a story on Gregory Smith. He had quite the media profile by then because his story was so unusual and inspiring. I had asked for half an hour of his time, but 3.5 hours later, we were still talking.
The intrigue and the engagement of that discussion led into another discussion the next day.
That interview, if we can call it an interview, went for another 2.5 hours or something crazy.
We ended up, we're calling each other at least once or twice a day, sometimes more, and we're texting in between. And that went on for some time.
At this point, he's a voice at the end of the phone. He doesn't have a physical form. He doesn't have an age. He's just this lovely voice in my ear who's funny and who's engaging. At some point, I was thinking, what's going on here? This is not an interview. This is now a really firm friendship that I've formed with this man.
I'd sort of indicated that if ever I was stopping in Orange, I'd pop in and have a coffee.
So Gregory rocked up to Orange and we just talked with such ease that when he left that evening, I remember thinking, I'm going to really miss you. And then we sort of slotted back into calling each other and texting and whatnot, and that went on for a while, until eventually we decided to meet up in the Blue Mountains.
And that's pretty much where we decided that we would, build a life together.
What's that tree down there? Do we know what that is?
It's a briar. Didn't particularly have reservations around his trauma. I do have a habit of running headfirst into places where angels fear to tread. That's my signature move. But in saying that, I could also see that Gregory had done the work. His whole ethos in life is to do no harm, and he does that considerably well.
So that line's a creek. So behind that, they've taken all the trees.
Yeah.
When we got together, I was 41 and Gregory was 64.
It's a significant age difference, but I don't know that I was overly concerned about it. If anything, I was concerned that Catherine might be concerned about it.
I didn't fall in love with the age difference. I did, however, fall in love with him, so I had to put aside any reservations that I had around age or anything else and just say, you know what? I'd like to be happy with this person, and it was that simple.
During the discussions that we were having before I came to Orange, Catherine talked about her 2 sons.
Go girls.
I said, I'm a job lot. I come with 2 kids. They're not going anywhere. So if you want a future with me, you have to have a future with my children.
So many eggs.
And in my mind, it was just as much as possible, just be the best person I can be. Try not to be their father, try not to expect too much from them. Yeah, great.
I've always kind of taken, in my brain, the kind of man of the house, right? And then Gregory came along and he was the new man of the house. So it was interesting at first. I definitely had some bias in my mind.
Yeah, mate.
There's 2 young boys doing what young boys do. They challenge authority, they question what's happening.
There you go, Jack. All those ladies loving you, all the girls coming up for a feed.
And I'm still working on that. I'm new at this game.
Well, there was a lot of arguments, but that was coming from me just thinking that I had more power than I did. But no, he turned out real good bloke.
The more I got to know him, the more I realised he was really nice. Yeah, and he's a good role model.
It was your chance to be discovered playing rugby league. That really good tackle you made on Jack.
They just sort of accepted it and rolled with it because he was a nice guy. He gave them time and attention, and that's all kids want.
Oh, no.
Oh, dear.
That's your fault.
I probably get it wrong more often than I get it right, but at the same time, I'm sure there'll become a point in all this where I get it right more than I get it wrong because I'm learning, and I love that learning process. They're great boys.
Very quickly I realised that Gregory was my person. And then I thought, I would love to have a child with Gregory. Somewhere in all of this, I'd forgotten that time had marched on and I was now in my 40s.
I sort of said, well, let's leave it up to the universe and see what happens.
I think we were about 2 months into the trying process. I thought, I think I'm pregnant.
It's like, wow, this is big.
Knowing Gregory's backstory, I thought, oh, this could be interesting, but he's an amazing dad. Seriously, like, the way that he can calm William down when no one else can, it's pretty impressive.
There you go, buddy. Hey, you're going for the ball.
One of the gifts of having a child at my age is I have a lot more understanding of what I would have liked as a child. It's so easy for me to try and provide for William, whether they're words, security, hugs, understandings, feeding him each meal, being there for him, the way I think that I would have liked it as a child. That's the ultimate gift, really, to be able to give someone what you desire most. You know, a loving, caring childhood. There we go. After where I came from, I'm asked often my thoughts on homeless people and rough sleeping. I was invited to be a director on the board of the End Street Sleeping Collaboration.
Dr. Gregory has a unique perspective because he has a unique experience, coming from a traumatic background and now being an academic. But tonight, he's out with Mission Beat. He's talking to the people in the front line to understand what they're experiencing and what people on the street are experiencing and bringing that back into our board.
Stolen generations. Let's say yes.
Forgotten Australians. The longer a person is without a home, the more difficult it is to take them and transition them back into housing. So early intervention is critical. And understanding why someone has ended up in that position. And that's one of the strengths of Belmore Park. It's so close to Central Station. It's dangerous. There's always hope, and there's always pathways and new directions in life. And sometimes we just need a chance. You would use alcohol and drugs to kill the pain. I feel very privileged to be granted this opportunity to participate so fully in life.
Okay, what are they doing? Are they playing silly?
My life has changed so much. I often, almost on a daily basis, am in awe of where I am today. There's nothing I need. I don't have to worry about where my next feed's coming from. You know, I have a beautiful partner that's incredibly supportive. 3 young boys that are family. It's just a beautiful space to be in.
There's no perfect families. I think we know that. We all know that. But the warmth from a family, the love that can occur when you're part of something that's bigger than yourself. If I think about, you know, what I've given Gregory, it would be that I've given him that unconditional love that he's surrounded by every single day.
If I ever do retire and I'm sitting on the veranda, you know, in the rocking chair, thinking back on my life, it'll be like, how did I do that? The answer is so simple. I did it just by doing what I had to do each day.